We've now successfully added authentication to our client app. With this in place, we can now begin work on the admin pages of the app. So in this video, we're going to make it possible for our admin user to sell, or in other words, create, an item from the client app. Now, of course, we already have an API endpoint for this. And as you can see on the screen now, I've already created the layout of this form. So the job in this video is going to be to link this form to the Vuex store and also to create the submit logic, which will include an authenticated API request. Let's now take a look at the cell view. Now this view loads the form component, item form, that we're going to be working on next. Before that though, when this view loads, what we need to do is create a new item model instance to prime the form. Now we did something very similar when we created a temporary user instance in the auth view. So the first thing we need to do is to import the item model. Next, we'll create a created hook. And inside that, we're going to use item create to add a new item to the Vuex store. And we'll pass in an object to that with one property data. We'll assign an object to that. And here's where we define the properties of our new item. And we just want to have an ID at this point. Now, like we did with the auth form, we want to use a temporary ID for this model instance, since the real ID for the item is not going to be available until we post it to the API. So we again have a temporary ID stored as a constant that's going to allow us to use it across multiple components. So let's go ahead and import that first. So we'll go import, and this one is temp item ID, and that comes from our constants file. All right, so now we can put temp item ID down here as the item's ID. So with that done, let's check out the item form, which is the form component on the cell view. So not only is it a child of the cell view, but this one is a parent of all the inputs that are used for the item form. So you'll see here we've got input title, input artist, year, image, price, and so on. Now, just like with the auth forms, we need to bind a Vuex ORM model to this form so that we can use it here, but also so that it can be passed down as a prop to all the inputs. So coming down into this component definition, we're going to go ahead and import the item model here as well. And you'll see that we have a local data property model, which is currently assigned to this model class, which is just a basically just like a mock class that I created so that the component would actually compile. But now that we have our item model introduced, we can go ahead and delete that there and replace the model with item there. And with that done, the item form is now bound to the Vuex ORM item model. So coming further down into the component definition, you can see this rather meaty function here called save. And this is a submit handling method. And you can see the first thing that it does is it goes ahead and validates all the inputs on this form. And if they're valid, you'll see that there's a little bit of logic here that now gets split out into some other methods that we're going to have to define. So the first method that it calls here is this one, send data. And this one is meant to call the API with the new item data, and it has to return an ID. That ID then gets passed into this success callback method, and that method has a number of jobs, but the main thing that it's got to do in this video is redirect to the new item that we've now created. So let's go ahead and define this sendData method. So we're first going to define an ID property, which we can get by deconstructing the context object. Next, we'll grab the data that we need from the item model by creating a new variable data and assigning to that item find ID. Next, we're going to return item $create, and we're going to pass in the data that we get from item find to that. So you remember that the $create method is a Vuex ORM Axios plugin method that is actually going to create an item on the server. Now, the reason that we return it is so that we can capture the ID from the new item object. Coming to the browser now, let's see if this works. So firstly, you want to come to the cell page, and to do that, you're going to firstly have to log in as the admin, because remember it's protected from any other user type. And then you can go up to the URL bar and type in /cell. We don't actually have a UI link to the cell page at this point in time, so you'll have to manually put it in like that. All right, let's go ahead and put in some data. So I'm just going to put in random things. Now the image needs to be a valid URL, so put that there. And let's put in some price. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And you'll see that we actually get redirected to this 404 page, saying that the page cannot be found. To get a little bit more info, let's come down to the console. And you can see what's actually happened here. Well, the first error that we actually got was a 401 unauthorized error. And if we go to the Network tab and inspect this a little more, you can see in the request down here that there's actually no auth header set. Now you might think, well, haven't we already dealt with this because ViewAuth is grabbing the auth token? The issue is that the Axios instance used by Vuex ORM is not the same Axios instance used by ViewAuth, and one doesn't know about the other. Fortunately, we can fix this issue fairly easily by coming over to our Vuex ORM Axios plugin config, and we're going to add another property to this now, which is access_token, and we'll assign a function to this. Now we can use this function to tell the Vuex ORM Axios plugin where to find the auth token and ensure that it gets added to all future requests. So you may recall from earlier videos that ViewAuth, once it grabs the token off the login or register response, it puts it into local storage. So we can just grab it out of local storage from here. So we can do that by going return window local storage. Local storage. And keep in mind that this is a key value store. So to access the auth token, we can access it like it were an array, and the name that ViewAuth gives to the token by default is just default _auth _token, like that. Now keep in mind this is going to throw an error if it can't find this particular key. So we should wrap this in a try catch. Oops. There. Now in the case that it can't find it, the way that we're going to handle such an error is simply to return a blank string like that. Coming back to the cell page now, I've added some random data into the form again, and let's click Save. And nothing appears to happen, but if we check the console down here, you'll see that we have a post items down here with a 200 status. And this time, if we check the request headers, you'll see that we now have an authorization header in there, which is good. So let's close that down. And let's go to the home page And you'll see that our new item is now being displayed here. The only unfortunate thing is that we seem to have two copies of the same item being shown. The reason we'll end up with two versions of this item in the store is that the temporary one we made for the form is there, and the one that just got returned from the API is also there. So the one that got returned from the API, this one actually includes the correct ID. So what we want to do is delete the temporary one before the new one is retrieved from the server. And we can do that by adding another line here and going item delete and passing in the ID. The last thing that we want to do now is define this success callback method. And what we want to do here is after our form submits, we want to actually redirect to the item that we've just created. So that's nice and easy to do. We can just go this $router push, and keeping in mind that we get the ID passed into this method, so we can just go items and pass in that ID into our template string like that. With those changes made, let's test out the cell form one more time. Once again, I've put in some dummy data there. Let's go ahead and press save. And you'll see once that happens that we get redirected to the new item that we've just created here. Of course, the image isn't showing because it's not a valid URL, but you can see all the other data there is. So that means this is now working. If we come back to the home page, this time we can see that we only have the one item without the unnecessary duplicate.